Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Bets and Banter, and today on the show, we're talking about UFC Vegas 93 or whatever's left of it. We got the sharpest chat in the game. You know that for Bets and Banter. But what else do we have? We have a great guest, the pride of New York, one of the sharpest handicappers in the whole space, representing fight numbers, the up-and-coming brand in the space, my brother from another, the great Pepe Silvia. How are you?
What up, G? Yo, it's been too long since we broke down a card, so I'm glad it was able to work out tonight.
Hell yeah, brother. No one better to be breaking down the card with. I'm excited to get into this action. And I'm honestly thinking there's a lot of live underdogs on this card. You know me, that's where my bread is typically buttered. I'm looking to be a little contrarian, stand against the market. And I think there's a lot of great opportunities to do that. And I also think that you've got some takes on fights that I'm not as bullish on, or I'm not as well-versed with. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts, brother. And speaking of, there's a fight right off the rip. It's in the 115-pound division. This is a fight I have no betting action on. It's the fight I've probably looked into the least. And it's just because for the Josephine Knudsen side, I found her fights to be pretty boring in my historical recollection. I was never really blown away. She does have some, ability to go out there and win fights, right? She trains with the right people. She looks to be in incredible physical shape. So there's a lot of positives on that side, but also Julia Polastri, she has more experience in terms of her professional career, and she does look to have a lot of skills in her own right. She's on a great run since losing on the Contender series. So fascinating fight, but again, not one that I broke down very much this week. So I'm curious what your thoughts are, brother. This is one I'm going to be taping tonight to write my article.
Yeah, it's a pretty good fight. And I took an early spot on Pilastri at plus 195. Small bet at just a unit. Not a super high conviction play, but one that I did see or find a small edge on. Like, number one, with a lot of these WMMA fights, when it's like minus 350 to go to the scorecards, how can you trust the judges to see it correctly? We see it time and time again where everyone thinks a certain fighter A won, but they score for fighter B. The judging has been all over the place. So when you get these big underdogs, especially with WMMA, it's like sometimes you just have to blind bet them. But for Pilastri, I like her. Like, I think both of these girls are solid. I think it's going to be a good fight. Knudsen, like, I know she's a solid prospect, and I know a lot of people are super high on her, and I do think she's solid. She kind of reminds me of Macy Barber of 115. Her arms are super short. She does a lot of air punching. She's got good kicks. But she's not high volume. She can get stuck on her back. She does seem pretty strong. She does have good elbows, but I don't think her upside is super high against a girl who's got good experience, who's fought the higher level of competition, who's actually younger than her, who has a longer reach, who has multiple finishes on the regional scene, submissions and knockouts. Those are things I like to see when I'm betting a big underdog at near 2-1. So I took the shot on Pilastri. I'm a fan of her game. She's super game. I think a lot of people want to give her shit for her Contender series performance, but she fought Jasmine Jasovicius at 125. She had no shot in that fight. And we saw her get stuck on her back. So, maybe people are thinking that Knudsen can get her stuck on bottom, but Knudsen doesn't have a great top game. She's not nearly as big as Jasmine. And I just see multiple ways that Pilastri can win. I think Pilastri actually has the better striking. I think she can hit harder, and I think she could get potential grappling going. So, I like the dog for a small shot. And, the market has kind of agreed with me. The line has came in a bit.
Yeah. And, this is another thing that I wanted to bring up here is that when I'm looking at this fight, you talked about the fact that the line has been coming down. It seems like public sentiment is the other way, right? It seems like everybody likes Knudsen in terms of the public perception, Tapology votes, these kind of things that I look for just as like indicators of where people are at in the community. And it seems like Knudsen's a popular bet. And so whenever I see a popular bet and the line moving the other way, I'm like, well, I know which side I have to be on now if I'm going to get on any side. And it doesn't mean that she's not going to win. It just means that the way I approach the game, popular sides that are, being offered at a better price, they normally don't do that because it's a going out of business sale and they don't want to make money. It's because they're, trying to get on the side of sharp players like Pepe, who got in early on the Pilastri side. So clearly, the numbers agreed with you. I think plus 168, according to our friends over at Fight Numbers, is the best possible line that you can get on Pilastri right now at that underdog price. Meanwhile, Circus Sports is dealing minus 180 on Knutson. So a sharp sports book willing to take your action at minus 180 for big limits right now in the overnight market. Just something to keep in mind here. But with that being said, my brother, I wish you the best of luck on your action, and we'll have to see. That's an article play for everybody out there. We'll see what I get to on that fight. But next up, my man, we got Shayilan Nerdenbecky taking on Melk Costa. And another weird fight here where this is a featherweight fight. Both these guys, ended up on the wrong end of Steve Garcia power punches. And I think that when I'm looking at the Melk Costa side, he has a game that seems more suited for winning more fights. He's got a long frame. He's a big guy. He could strike a little bit on the feet. Last time out, he kind of wrestled himself into a hole against Steve Garcia. I talk about that sometimes. When you go out there and wrestling's not your go-to, it's not your base, it's not your bread and butter, and you want to just wrestle, it's exhausting, right? And wrestlers know that. That's why a lot of them in MMA pick their spots with the wrestling. They go out there and use their hands, things like that, because it is exhausting to wrestle for 15 minutes. And you know what the cost is going to be physically, how much it's going to tax you to go out there and push that pace. I think Melk Costa found that out, right? Steve Garcia, he's a big guy. He's fought at lightweight. He's fought, he beat Chase Hooper, who's now on the run of a lifetime, right? Our guy. So when you look at, both these guys, how they performed, obviously Shayilan landed some big shots in the first round. That's kind of his upside. He could be a powerful striker at times. And when you're looking at the underdog price, I understand why people are tempted by that. But I just think in terms of the submission wrestling and the submission grappling, if it was there, if it was going to translate, we would probably see it at this point in his career. He's had a ton of professional experience, many, many fights. And then when he's out there against guys that are eminently submittable, like Soriano, he's not submitting him, right? Like a guy who's just made a career of losing via submission in the UFC. So I think that this is, for me, a spot where Melk Costa is probably the guy that has more upside, but he's also the guy that I think lacks a little durability. And I'm nervous about that at the favorite distinction. So if I was to play anything on this fight, I would play props, either looking at the KO on the Shayilan side, playing into that as potential upside, or the submission potentially for Costa, because I do think the long limbs, a guy who's going to be shooting a lot of front headlocks, could get hurt in this fight and then shoot a bad takedown. Those seem like paths for me. How about you, my brother?
Yeah, I just finished taping this fight before we got on, a little bit before we got on, and I found an angle that I really liked for it. So I drove to the casino to get a decent amount down on it. And
you're my spirit animal, brother. I did that the other night to get a good price on something. So that you're speaking
and fucking DraftKings and FanDuel fuck me. I can't bet on them. I can only get peanuts down on them. So as soon as I walk past security, I'm shitting you not, I walk past a guy who's got vitiligo also, and I'm going to place a bet on a Costa fight. I was like, what are the chances? It's like synchronicities. But the way I see this fight is someone's going to get finished. I think we're getting a good price on Doesn't Go the Distance because of the Lingo and Costa fight. And if you rewatch that fight, Lingo's a tough son of a bitch. He's not very good, but he can take a fucking beating. And Costa beat the shit out of him. He was very close to getting finishes, multiple points, but he never did. I think I don't think Shayilan could take that kind of beating that Lingo took. So, but on the other side, Shayilan has developed his striking quite a bit. He can crack really hard, and Costa is there to be cracked. So I give Shayilan some early finish upside, some KO upside. But I also like the submission prop on the Costa side. I saw when he was fighting against Garcia that he tried to initiate the grappling. And what he was doing was he was putting him against the fence, and he was trying to climb up his back to take his back and choke him out. The problem was Garcia was too tall, but Shayilan is a little shorter. I think it'll be easier for him to jump on his back if he's able to. And I don't know how long Shylan's going to be able to last with Coast on his back if he gets him early. Shylan also does kind of gas. He hasn't fought any grapplers in his UFC run. He's been submitted multiple times on the regional scene. I think it's a pretty solid spot for Costa sub, but I also like the under also to play them together. I think is a solid way to go about it.
Man, we are seeing this one exactly eye to eye. Just poking over at the best fight odds menu for a second, plus 450 or so appears to be the ticket for the Costa by sub. I don't think that's a bad look. I think that's a great way to buy down on a guy who, if you're worried about his durability, hey, let's play into the upside. Let's go grapple. Let's maybe protect that chin a little bit. And I think he could initiate grappling exchanges from round 1 to round 3 and get the submission. So absolutely an angle that I'm looking to potentially target as well this week from a prop perspective. Shout out to my guy Billy Briz with the birthday wishes. We've had that pass, but obviously still celebrating, still having a great time. So I appreciate you, my man. Thank you for the well wishes. Thank you to everybody who's rocking with us in the chat. Sharpest chat in the game, and a lot of people assembled here. If you guys are here on YouTube, go ahead and smash that like button. Help other people find the show. And if you're on Twitter, go ahead and or X, whatever the hell they call it these days, go ahead and share this with your following, and hopefully we can get a great fight conversation rolling. But next up, my man, Jekka Seregi in the featherweight division is a massive favorite here, taking on my guy, Weston Wilson. And Weston Wilson's fighting for his job in this fight, but he's not a guy that needs to fight, right? He has a career, he's got money. Doesn't seem like he's fighting because, he's interested in self-preservation, right? He goes out there and takes risks, right? He's willing to get hit. That last fight against John Silva, he got his ass beat. He was going for takedowns. He's still looking to get the fight to the floor and maximize his win condition. And when I'm looking at this fight, brother, I have to just say right off the rip, until I taped this, I was a little bit more on the pass side, and just looking at the tape and what's in front of me, I like Jekka Seregi. I said last time, I think he's going to knock out Lucas Almeida. And he did, right, in the first round. Made me look cool on the Roto Grinder show, and I had it in the article and everything. But even still, man, that's a guy that I think is not very dangerous. Like Lucas Alexander is a guy that I think can go out there and outpoint you for 15 minutes, but I don't think he's a very proven finisher at this level. And so I'm looking at a guy in Weston Wilson. He's basically finish reliant in most of his fights. But in that fight against John Silva, he did land a good one too. It's not like there was nothing to look at positively. Against Joanderson Brito, he rolled for not one, but 2 leg locks. And the second one looked to have some promise. Then he loses position. Joanderson Brito grabbed the cage and then absolutely smashes him. So I like Joanderson Brito, right? And I think he would be pretty heavily favored to destroy Jekka Seregi, right? And it's not because they would just stand there and bang it out of the feet. He could easily take him down and do whatever he wants to him on the ground. We saw him comfortably on top of Diego Lopes at certain points in their bout. So I think that this is a spot where, the rubber could meet the road for Jekka. It's not 2 or 3 fights ago, Anshel Jubilee is taking him to school on the mat and absolutely beating the tar out of him. And Weston Wilson, like I said, if he's nothing else, he's persistent with that takedown attempt. He went for it against Brito. He went for it against John Silva. He got thrown to the ground, slammed on his back. He just got back up and went for another takedown. For all of his faults, which there are many, right? And we'll get to those now, which is he could easily get sparked in the first round in this fight. His defense is not good. He keeps his hands low. His coach is like, hands up. He's like, got it, coach. Right here. Same level. Never puts his hands up higher. But I really feel like this is a spot where the money line, anytime you see a line go from plus 350 in one fight to minus 350 the next fight, I'm not going to be on that side, even if I like the fighter, even if I think they're a cool guy or whatever. And especially here, it's can I see a realistic path for Weston Wilson? Yeah, I absolutely can. And I think it could be positional TKO because we've seen Jekka get physically exhausted after one round before. A little bit of that cigarette cardio, if you will, and not like Carlos Prates, not the cool kind that you do dances after and you're smoking when you get the 50,000. It's like the kind where after one round with Anshel Jubilee, you're on cardiac arrest in the corner. So yeah, man, for me, it's just a dogger pass. Creative ways to play it, maybe an ends by sub, lean into the fact that Weston Wilson's got a long ass neck, starts rolling around on the ground, being a little bit wild in his fights. And Jekka does attempt, so I think he went for a guillotine on Anshel Jubilee. But yeah, man, as far as I'm concerned, this is a fight where it's clear what they want, right? Jekka Sergi, go out here and deliver this man, get him out of our hair. But I just think Weston Wilson's going to go out there and try and submit him. So I would play, the upside on the sub props round 1, round 2, something like that. How about you, my man?
Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint you and the people, but I don't really have too much of an opinion on this fight. I actually didn't really tape it fully. I kind of just felt like the UFC was trying to set up Jekka. I didn't want to just donate on Weston Wilson. So, maybe I'll look into it a little bit, but not a fight that I'm really interested in. Sorry.
No, I totally understand. Here's the question I would pose to you as a guy who I really respect your opinion. If you had like John Silva or Joanderson Brito, and you had to just like gut feel line them against this guy, right? Jekka Sergi, again, a guy I like, would they not be like minus 300 or so each? Like or like minus 250? That I'm curious what you think.
We'll put it this way. What was his name? Lucas Fernandez. He was or Lucas Alexander, the guy from Fusion XL. He was, what was he, minus 400 to Jekka?
I think he was minus 500 or something, dude.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, Jekka got the KO1. Now he's, being priced like a heavy hitter or whatever. I actually bet on Jubilee against Jekka, so, he wasn't someone I was taking serious at all. And, I'd even rate Jubilee that high. I had Breeden against him. So I just think it's kind of like a car crash fight. I don't like the way Wilson reacts to being hit. I didn't like his tape coming into the UFC either. And Jekka is young enough to be making some big improvements. With these guys from the overseas, when they start training in the States, oftentimes we see them get a lot better. I could see his process getting better. He obviously has some power in his hands. So yeah, I don't know what that equates to as far as where the value is. Let me put it like this. I would never lay a favorite price on him. It has to be dog or pass, but I think for now I'm just choosing to stay away.
Fair play, my man. I think that this fight very likely to end inside the distance. I do think Weston Wilson, not a very good chin, not a reliable chin, right? I would never play Weston Wilson at chalk against anybody, right? So in that regard, they have some similarities, but I do think Jekka way more long-term upside. He's going to continue to get better over time. He does have real knockout power, and he's fun. Like, he's got a fun style. You can see why they want to market him a little bit from a unique part of the world, but we just got to remember, in 2020, he's getting submitted via rear naked choke, in one pride, right? He's getting dominated on the ground by Anshul Jubilee, who is a fine fighter, we'll say, right? Like, but nothing more than that. And then you look prior to that, he got Kimura in his early career. His grappling has been a concern throughout, and he worked a little bit with Paddy Pimblett. I've given him credit along the way. He does deserve to be favored to win this fight, but it's just an aggressive indication for a guy who doesn't have great cardio, doesn't have a great grappling path, and hasn't proven very much. So,
yeah,
for me, clear dog or pass.
Sometimes it's hard for me to step in the way of what the UFC wants, even though, a lot of times the UFC doesn't always get what they want. They can only put the fighters in positions to perform as such. So, a lot of times those are the times you get the best numbers, because no one likes to step in front of the narratives, because, usually they're pretty clear on what the UFC wants. So I do get it as like a smart play. But yeah, for some reason I have a hard time getting in front of that.
Yeah, I typically I'm the same way. And so if I get involved with this one, it might be one of my smaller bets on the card. But again, it's the upside on the early sub numbers. Like, they're all huge. And it's just like, I can't see him. I can't unsee him going for, reasonable sub attempts. And in his off time between these fights, he's gone to New Wave and like some of the premier grappling institutions in the world to try and get better. And it's just because he's a nerd and wants to fight and have fun, and for me, I just respect that craft. So is he the greatest dog shot on the card? Maybe not, but I do think that he's worthy of a bet in this underdog odds range.
Well, he might be if he fucking submits him in round one, then he will be the best underdog.
Breeden is like the point you made, right? You bet Breeden in that fight against Jubilee. Who did the UFC want to win?
Yeah, that's true.
It's so obvious that they fired Mike Breeden after he won the fight. They're like,
Yeah,
thanks anyways, dude. We don't need your services.
yeah.
So in
But the
this fight,
difference, the
Weston Wilson
difference,
might get his walking papers with a hey, congratulations on beating our guy. Now get the hell out of here, you bastard. Like,
yeah. The difference was that Breeden had shown throughout his career that he was a junkyard dog, and that like it was going to be hard to put him away. I could count on him to, fight for my money. And Wilson, I can't really say the same for.
fair play, my man. Next up, we got a women's fight. This is going down in the flyweight division. It's Carly Judice taking on Gabriela Fernandez. My man, why don't you lead us off here?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight. The mush of the week, we'll say. Um, I don't really know exactly. Well, I know how I'm approaching the fight, but so I was kind of like I've been kind of conflicted on what I want to do with it, because I do kind of think that Fernandez is a lot cleaner than her. She has way more experience than her. But she's just so low volume. It kind of sucks betting on, especially in WMMA, betting on girls at chalk who are very low volume. I do like her striking though. It's very solid. Powerful kicks, very accurate. She's really good at managing range. She's got solid experience. She's a little well-rounded. She's been exposed, but only for her defensive wrestling. And she's fought two very good wrestlers who were able to control her the whole fight. Jasmine and Bleda. Those are two of the better wrestlers at 125. We saw Jasmine completely control Miranda Maverick, who's a ranked fighter in the division. So I can't take too much against her. And in regards to this matchup, it doesn't really play that much of a role because Carly's not a grappler whatsoever. So, I think that Fernandez has the better experience. She's the cleaner striker. I give a lot of advantages to her. But like I said, I don't really want to lay the chalk on a low volume striker. But the angle that I do like for this fight is Fernandez by submission. She got her brown belt in December of 2023. She's been training at MMA Masters for the past couple years. MMA Masters is the camp that Ernesta trained at, who fought Judice on Contender series. So they're familiar with her. The thing about Judice and Ernesta, and Judice and anyone she's fought, she's never fought someone with as much grappling experience as Fernandez. So I think Fernandez has a decent amount of grappling upside, even though she's been known to have grappling downside in her previous fights. She has multiple submissions on her record on the regional scene. She's got a pretty good guillotine. She rocked a girl and then put her in a guillotine that she adjusted for and ended up getting it. What kind of grappling does Judice have? She's from Louisiana. She looks to be just a brawler. She's only been training MMA for a few years. Does she know how to defend submissions? I don't think so. I think Fernandez by sub is a pretty solid play, and it captures a lot of upside, and you don't have to lay the juice on Fernandez.
I feel the same way. I did get involved early on the Judice side, and the reason being was pretty straightforward, right? It's just you have one girl who hasn't recorded 30 significant strikes yet in a UFC fight, and she's had two opportunities. She's been controlled for 60+% of the fights. So it's like she's basically just not had any success yet offensively. And I know that in round 3, she had a couple of nice shots that she landed on the feet against Teresa Bleda, but then Teresa Bleda again takes her down, gets on top, passes to the mount for the second time in the fight. So I think that her ground game is very offensive, right? But I don't think that it's very quality. Like once she's on her back, I just don't rate it. I do think that she fought better girls, more proven grapplers. But in this fight, I feel like both women probably will be content to keep it on the feet unless somebody gets knocked down in this fight. So I do think it's an interesting way to play Fernandez though, because I will say she like jumped even to the back on a couple women. Like unsuccessfully, but like I think Edna Oliveira, she like tried to jump on her back at one point. She's aggressive hunting for them. So she will look for those opportunities. I don't know how Giudice will react. She did grapple in one of her fights early on, and she looked okay in that fight. So I really don't know how to rate her. But what I will say is going into the Carrasquete fight, I bet her by submission in that fight. And I was just thinking it was like plus 1,200 or something. I was like, Carrasquete, I thought was being brought in, to have a fun back and forth scrap, but ultimately lose. I think she was fighting Shavkat's sister. And I don't know that experiment's worked out either, but it was like a fight where I was like, man, the UFC probably doesn't want to see this girl succeed. And Carly Giudice coming in on short notice, long limbs. That's always something I look for submission equity. But she couldn't get takedowns in that fight. If you remember, she shot for a couple, and it was not successful. Now, on the Fernandez side, I do think she's fought the better quality of competition. But I feel like if this fight goes to the cards, it's not going to be a good look. Like talking about judges not understanding what they're watching, I just have bet on Vanessa Demopoulos enough times in Las Vegas and watched her go out there and clearly get outlanded on impactful strikes. But she's out there throwing, committing to her offense, coming forward, attempting a lot of offense, and she gets the nod. And I think that that's Carly Giudice's upside as a big underdog in this fight. So now she's closed to a smaller underdog price, not as encouraged to play that. But just looking at the early numbers, it's like a girl that can go out there and throw 200 plus significant strikes in a fight, because last time out, you remember, she took that fight on short notice. She wasn't supposed to be there. She's now in much better physical shape. If you just look at the conditioning from that fight, or even like her previous fights to now, I think she looks like she's in much better shape. She's got a great manager as well. So tricky fight here, but I think both women have upside.
She did take she did take the Contender Series fight on short notice. But the thing about Ernesta is she has no head movement. She's super easy to hit. She's a zombie. She's just walking forward. Fernandez has footwork. She knows how to manage range. She's not going to be able to get off that kind of volume that she was against Ernesta. And the difference is Fernandez actually hits hard, unlike Ernesta, who kind of just, death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. So I think Fernandez is going to hurt her pretty bad too when she lands. Giudice is a dog, though. It seems like she can take a beating. Those Southern girls down there, like, they're tough. They're Southern tough. So I don't know if she'll get like straight put out or whatever. Fernandez, they both have good kicks. Giudice was getting ate up to the body by body kicks. She couldn't see them coming. She was getting countered really easy. Fernandez is a counter striker. I could see Fernandez.
And she has a pretty decent body kick, so good point.
Yeah,
there.
And I could see Fernandez rocking her and grab the gilly. I'll just call it round 2 submission for Fernandez, club and sub.
Oh, my man with the round 2 sub calls, just a classic. I might have to tell that just for posterity's sake, but this is for me a fight where I kind of feel like the sides are it was Giudice plus 170 and then violence for me. So like fight not to go the distance. I think there's upside for both women to finish the fight. If you're going to throw 170 significant strikes, somebody could easily go down or get exhausted from fighting at that pace. And conversely, if the other girl is just getting free opportunities to counter on you because you're going to give 170 opportunities, then I think that could lead to her getting hurt in this fight. I think Fernandez is more powerful than Carrasquete, to your point. And probably a more willing grappler as well. So interesting points all around. But the other thing is, that was a fight where Giudice, I believe, was a favorite going into that Carrasquete fight. And, she loses a split decision, still gets signed by Dana. That was also something that just stuck with me where like most people, there's not like a sympathetic story. Even some winners, he's like, hey, go get another win or two on the regional scene. And he liked what he saw enough to sign her there. She does have a real manager. That's the other thing that stuck out to me. I think it's Sucker Punch Entertainment. They have real fighters on their roster. And so I think that's why she's in good shape now and a couple other things.
It also goes to show you how desperate they are to get women in the UFC, because a lot of times they use certain women off the Contender Series to build up other people. Fernandez is 0-2. If she gets a win here, then they can re-sign her. And then they'll have another maybe more winnable fight for Giudice in the future. She's still super young. I'm sure she's improving. She's green as hell. She's got a good left hook. Who knows? We'll see.
Hell yeah, man. Women's violence. Let's run it up. But in any case, my brother, we can move along to this next fight if I can get out of this Tapology wormhole. We got Nate Maness taking on Jimmy the Brick Flick. And I already took some grief in my comment section for a bet I haven't placed. But, I just feel like, again, what do I talk about long-term fundamentals? It's like a guy I love in Nate Maness, a guy I've bet on before, Kentucky tough, right? Broken jaw, still comes back out there to cash my plus 160. That's a soldier. That's a kind of guy you like having money on. But when you're talking about laying minus 500s on guys that have never been favored in a UFC fight before, it's a tough sell for me, right? When you're talking about fading a guy who's like a sub merchant with a guy who got submitted 2 fights ago, that's tough for me, right? Just again, from a long-term numbers standpoint, can he win the fight? Of course. Should he be favored to win the fight? Of course. Nobody would dispute that. Then it just comes down to where are we talking about on this scale, right? How many times out of 10? How many times out of 100? And I just think that Jimmy Flick is, a sub opportunity here. I do think Jimmy Flick by sub, another guy who's kind of like front loaded in his, win condition. Got to go out there and get it early. Sub 1, sub 2. That's the way I see it. And the only controversial take I could come up with, like if I go in my tinfoil hat, as my guy Clint would say, or, just like a long shot would be, what if Jimmy Flick could just body triangle this guy for 2 or 3 rounds like Umar did and win a decision by just out grappling him? I don't think that's a high percentage chance. I do think Flick slows down over the course of his fights. He's a submission over position grappler historically, but I have seen that again 3 fights ago. And I bet Nurmagomedov inside the distance didn't work out for me. Then I did the exact same thing with Ulanbekov and he finished him, right? And I had the ITD there and the KO at like 14-1 or something like that. So I like Nate Maness, but again, it's just like at 125, how proven is he? You got, a handful of fights under his belt. He's not super proven in this weight class, cutting a lot of weight to make it here. Another Jose Johnson, everybody's talking about his weight cut. The guy who's like an inch or 2 smaller than him. Nobody's talking about his weight cut, even though he's only done it a handful of times. So I think that this is a fight where obviously I prefer the Nate Maness side as this fight goes deeper, right? Rounds 2 and rounds 3, it's Nate Maness takeover season, right? We've seen with a broken jaw, he's still come out there and mug you. But in round 1, if this fight goes to the ground and you laid minus 500 on Maness, I do think you're going to be like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, why did I do this? So that's my gut feeling. How about you, brother?
Yeah, I anchored everything I played this week to Nate Maness money line. Just got inspired to do it. No, I'm just kidding. I like the under in this fight. I know that's not your style. I know you don't like to lay juice under 1.5. Just from talking to you a lot, I know that that's not something you would do. But I just think like it finishes under 1.5, like 75% of the time, 80% of the time. So I think we're getting a solid. I think I'm getting a solid number on the under 1.5. That way, if Flick does get his early sub, I still win. If Flick gets knocked out in 30 seconds, I win. If Flick is able to control him in round 1 and slow down a little bit in round 2, Maness carries his power. He can still knock him out in the first half of round 2. I mean, for God's sake, he knocked out Tony Gravely in round 2, who's a pretty tough customer. So, I like the under 1.5. I was kind of surprised it's not like minus 240. In a Flick fight, it's usually way more juice. So I was kind of curious why the number was so good.
Yeah, I actually agree with you here. Just like in terms of my lean, I think this fight goes under at a very high clip. I think on the ground and pound show I do for Roto Grinders this week, I said this is the fight that's probably most likely to end inside the distance on the slate, which most people, at 125, they might balk at that, but it's just like you got 2 guys that I think both have paths to finish and then also have paths to get finished. And I think on the Flick side, I mean, just being the guy that Charles Johnson finished in the UFC, you got to like just wear that as like a badge of honor and shame at the same time. Charles Johnson obviously can go after people, but it's typically in rounds 2 and 3 when they start to fatigue. It's not I come out and barnstorm you in the first round and you just no moss it. And I don't know what you can ever expect in terms of resistance from Jimmy Flick, but I just also am not a minus 500 guy. So I'd prefer if I was to lay chalk to be on the under. That's a way I like to avoid steering into a side in a highly variable.
And I mean, if Manessa's covering the number, the under is probably hitting too. So that's the other thing. And something that I was thinking about was, so Nate Maness is kind of late in his career. I'm sure he's self-aware enough to know that he doesn't have the longest shelf life as an MMA fighter. It's really tough to have a long career in the UFC, and he's had mixed results. He probably knows he's not, the greatest fighter on the roster. He's not even in the rankings. He has a family, he has a kid. What better way to make of this opportunity? He's getting a very finishable fighter to get a $50,000 performance bonus and, really kill this guy. So I think he's going to be extra motivated to get an early finish, hoping that he gets that extra 50K.
Hell yeah. Kentucky tough. I wouldn't be mad at it. Even if I bet Jimmy Flick, I wouldn't be mad at it because Nate Maness, cool guy, easy guy to root for. So shout out to Nate. Interesting fight there at 125 pounds. Somebody probably going home embarrassed there. But next up, man, we got a welterweight contest kicking off the main card. It's Adam Fugit taking on Josh Quinlan. And, Fugit back up against the wall. He's got no illusions about that. He's basically saying, like, I'm all in on this camp. I moved my life out to Arizona, putting in the work, trying to get better. And it's tough at 35 years of age, exactly what to expect from him. Hard to say. The one thing that I have, maintained in the back of my mind is the quality of losses I think are pretty high. When you look at Fugit, yeah, he's gotten losses, in a pretty devastating way. But Michael Morales, a guy that I think a lot of people project into the top 15 long term. Mike Malott, a guy who was literally one fight away from being in the top 15. He was about 2.5 minutes away from being in the top 15 against Neil Magny before he completely imploded on himself and blew it. So this is a fight where, he's not as physical, he's not as durable potentially, but I do think, he might be as skilled as a guy like Quinlan, and he has all the will in the world. He's going to go out there and give you everything he's got, but sometimes his body fails him when he just gets lit up, right? The Kinoshita win, unfortunately, didn't age so great. I think the Solomon Renfro win is actually the best win of his career. And he's a guy that has, come through as a dog before, right? He's basically an underdog every time he walks out there. He has some proof of concept going out there and getting it done. Meanwhile, Josh Quinlan, a guy that a lot of people had, high expectations for. I remember I faded him with Logan Urban on the Contender series. That turned out not so good for me, if you remember that fight. But when you look back, Jason Witt, good entry-level UFC fight, right? A great way to step your foot in the door. If you're a guy like Quinlan, you got some power. But the thing that fascinates me about this fight, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is the reach, right? Because that's been the common culprit for what has made Josh Quinlan struggle in these recent fights, right? Fights Trey Waters, big guy, long guy, keeps you at range with the boxing, used a little bit of footwork, and Josh Quinlan just had a hard time getting inside. He had a hard time landing his impactful shots, and he was a little bit behind the whole time against a big guy like Waters. Danny Barlow, they exchanged a little bit more heavily in that fight, but I think that's because Barlow just welcomes the ruckus. I don't think he's afraid to engage at all. I don't think he's afraid to exchange. I don't think defense is necessarily a priority. I think he's trying to kill people, and he accomplished that, right? Multiple times in that third round. And Quinlan is a glutton for punishment, right? Has no problem just getting up, hit me again, tube sock, just go down, get back up. But he also absorbed a metric shit ton of damage, and he's getting right back in there. Fugit's had some time to prepare for this fight. He kind of knows the stakes and the implications. And I had said earlier this week on my program, I felt like it was a little bit of an ego play from Quinlan. I do think he could win this fight. Obviously, he's got great athletic potential. He's got the ability to finish, but he took a lot of damage, rushing right back in there. And Fugit is going to give him everything he's got right away. So it just seems to me like Fugit's the kind of guy where if you end up on the wrong, positions with him, where he's on top, he might not be the most sophisticated grappler, but he'll win an ass whooping contest from the top position, And Kinoshita, again, he tried to scramble, he tried to move, he got dropped in that fight and tried to get back up, and he was getting fucked up. And I like the grappling sequences that I saw from him there. He threatened on the positions. Quinlan has a black belt on paper, but he just doesn't really go out there to implement a wrestling and grappling game plan. And when he's tried to wrestle, it hasn't worked out successfully for him at this level. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts, but I have been leaning towards the Fugit side all week. I haven't made any clicks on this one.
Yeah, I know a couple of sharp buddies of mine that like the Fugit side actually, But I'm going to say something that's like super boring and people aren't going to like it. But I don't think there's any edge on this fight whatsoever. I think it should be lined 50-50. And if someone thinks they have a great edge on this fight and has some great advantage that, they know is going to play out a certain way, power to them. But I don't find it. I don't see it. Power ranking wise, as far as opponents they've fought, they've beaten worse opponents than who they're fighting now, and they've lost to better opponents to who they're fighting now. So they're meeting each other at this weird crossroad where it's a 50-50 fight, in my opinion. If Fuga was faster and more athletic, I would take him just because he seems a little more well-rounded. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little biased because I bet him against Kinoshita and I like the grit that he showed. But Quinlan kind of seems like he could take a beating. Fuga has decent power. Like he's finished multiple people in the first round. And Quinlan is coming off that brutal beating. It's only been 3 months. Who knows what kind of punishment he can take. So there's too many variables in this fight. So I don't want to get involved. I think it should be a pick 'em. I think it's lined fine.
Hey, fair play, my man. I was seeing plus money poke up on Fuga, but obviously nothing substantial. We'll see where this line ends up closing out tomorrow. I would not be surprised to see Quinlan take late steam. He seems like a popular side every time he's out there from a betting perspective. So it'll be curious to see how this one moves closer to fight time. But my brother, we can move along to the next fight here on the main card, where we will see Asu Almabayev taking on Jose Johnson. And we did reference Jose Johnson before. Reason being, we talked about the weigh-in, right? When you look at a guy like Jose Johnson, massive for this flyweight division, and it's rare that you see a size differential this big in a fight period in the UFC, right? You got a guy who's 5'4" taking on a guy who's 6 foot tall. I mean, it's just substantially different size opponents here. And then on the other side, Almabayev also going to be at a substantial reach disadvantage. The younger fighter here, Jose Johnson, believe it or not, by a small margin. So all the anthropomorphics I look at, he's checking those boxes stylistically. We know that there's some reasons to be concerned, right? He has been taken down before, got twisted in the first round by Damone Blackshear. So the grappling has been a little bit of a liability at times for Johnson. However, the one thing I want to note is, for me personally, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this as well, I would take Damone Blackshear straight up against Asu Almabayev. I think he would out-grapple him. I think he's way more physical. I think he could pick him up and slam him on his head.
Yeah, the size difference is like massive.
Yeah, astronomical. So for me, when I'm thinking about this fight, I'm saying to myself, okay, Jose Johnson last time out beat a junkyard dog in Chad and Hellinger, a very difficult guy to put away. Good guys have tried, haven't been able to do it. He got his nose absolutely shattered, I think, in the first round, 2 or 3 fights ago in the UFC. Did not fold up shop in that fight, continued to fight, continued to move. And I'm thinking about in this fight, like, what is the downside for Jose Johnson here, right? Number one, his long-term stylistics. He knows everybody that I fight is going to try to take me down. Why? I'm long, I'm tall, I'm awkward. You ain't want to stand this far away from me. I can hit you with all these crazy things. You won't see half of them coming. And for Asu Almabayev, is there a more predictable fighter in the flyweight division? You know what he's going to do. He's going to go out there and try and wrestle and grapple. So I think we're going to see a Jose Johnson that understands the assignment. Try not to let this guy pass my guard. Try not to get in a terrible position and do damage. And this is a guy that against Cartwright, he was a big underdog. He was able to go out there and find the win. He opens a big underdog, so money came in on him in that spot. Then you look back, Mo Miller, he's a huge underdog. Gets the win in that spot. It's like, this guy has been a big underdog before. He's produced. He's gone out there and gotten the wins in crunch time when it mattered. And the losses, you just look through the ledger, you're like, good fighter, good fighter, good fighter. It's like, he's fought very quality guys throughout his career. So another thing that I look for, guys with more professional experience, he's got that. So he's had more fights. He's the younger guy, the longer guy, taller guy, bigger guy, fought at the higher weight class, fought the better competition. When you look at Asu Almabayev, he stepped up in competition before, early in his career. Tagir Ulanbekov, if you guys go back and watch that, it wasn't like Tagir Ulanbekov knows wrestling positions better than him. He just was way bigger and stronger. And every time they got into those clinches, those scenarios, he'd just horse him to the ground. Say, get down, young man. You're on my leg. Get off me. just like move him around. And that's Tatsuro and Bekov, who's not known for being that physical, and he's a flyweight. So like Tatsuro, he's a good grappler, he's skilled, but that's kind of like the knock on Tatsuro, if there's anything, right? It's like, you know, he gets muscled around a little bit. Sometimes he can get pushed around a little bit. He's kind of frail. He looks a little gangly. That's kind of the knock on him. So that guy like threw him around and slammed him on his shoulder and busted him up. And I do think that Jose Johnson has some real like brain farts sometimes on the ground, right? And that is the way he loses this fight in embarrassing fashion. But Ode Osborne, guys, was like plus 160, 170. He is a much more known easy mark at 125 pounds to grapplers. I said Jafel Fila is going to go out there and submit him easily. Jafel Fila took him to the ground, beat him up, and submitted him. And it's because there was literally footage of the exact same things going down in the Almabayev fight. And I just think that when you got a guy like Johnson, who's not easy to consolidate top position on for the most part, he's throwing elbows, he's being creative, he's throwing up kicks, he's attempting his own submissions. That's not a very comfortable guy to be on top of. I think he could win this decision from his back. Bold take, but like we've seen before, he's very active off of his back. It wouldn't be the first time in the UFC. And Almabayev, it's not like he's going to go out there and throw an insane volume of strikes, I feel. So I do think if you're on the Asu side, Asu by decision, I think it is a contrarian type of angle. I do think Johnson has made some improvements on the ground. But I think that for me, this is a fight where Asu, last time out, man, CJ Vergara, he's been submitted before. Not just by my guy, right? Not just by Tatsuro Taira. He's been submitted before regionally as well. So I feel like when I'm looking at a guy who just didn't submit CJ Vergara as a minus 600 favorite, everybody's ready to go back to the well and run it all again. He opened minus 142 in that spot. So if I played Ode Osborne, I feel like I'm almost obligated to get some Jose Johnson in this spot. How do you feel about this one, my brother?
Yeah, I played Asu against Ode, but the price was like minus 130. Like, I don't know. The price doesn't make sense here. The matchup doesn't really make sense either. Like, I don't know. Is Asu ranked number 15?
That's possible.
It's because why would they give him Jose Johnson, who's making his flyweight debut? You know, wouldn't you think they would want to, you know, have Jose start a little like further back? I mean, if Jose was making a lot of points in media day about how, you know, he's going to win this fight and then he's going to fight in the top 10. I guess he kind of has a point. At first, I thought he was smoking crack because it's like, buddy, this is your first fight at flyweight. What are you talking about? Like fighting in the top 10 and then
Ursek 1-3. He's in a title fight. Nobody knew who he was.
A title shot. It's like, but I mean, I guess he kind of has a point if he beats 15, I guess. You know, maybe the UFC is trying to build Asu. I'm not sure. I think the price is very wide. I do kind of like the over. I don't really see an Asu finish. I like the over at plus money. Jose Johnson is solid, man. Like you alluded to, his losses to Blackshear, that was a sick twister. Like, Asu's not going to pull something off like that. He lost to Amanda Martinez by early KO. I don't really see him getting early knockout. And he lost to Ronnie Lawrence, who's a pretty good 135 wrestler. Those are his losses in the past 4 years. His win over Mo Miller was super impressive. Like, Mo Miller's a solid prospect who, you know, was supposed to be, you know, the next in the UFC. You know, he was like minus 500 on Contender series and he won and Dana didn't sign him. And the thing about Jose, he has such a huge height advantage. Have you seen the fight in LFA where he did the Travis Brown elbows to the guy who was trying to get the takedown on him? Absolutely shuts the guy's body off. The dude's body starts like moving in like a snake movement, just like weird neurological reaction. The dude's got power in all limbs. He's going to be the one doing a lot more damage. Asu is more of a control type fighter. That's not what scores in today's UFC scoring criteria. So to have him at minus 500 doesn't make sense to me. Like you said, Jose can win the fight from bottom just by, you know, just jamming elbows. I think he could create like a sweep scenario where he sweeps to get on top. get in dominant position. On the feet, I think he's going to have the advantage with such a big reach advantage. So I think all the upside is with Jose. Yeah, he's going to get taken down, but he can work his way back up. It's just, yeah, the price is kind of crazy.
I mean, with all due respect, everybody who's convicted on the Asu side in the comments, and I respect you guys' take, I would just put forward these two questions, right? Number one, what's the best win of his career? And is it better than who he's fighting this time? And I would argue no. I would say it's either Zach Makovsky, CJ Vergara, or Ode Osborne. And I would think that Jose Johnson is better than all those guys, with all due respect to those guys I mentioned. Now, let's talk about the fact that one other question I'll throw out to you guys, right? Is he reliable to go out there and cover this price of minus 500? In 2022 in September, not in the UFC banner, in Brave FC, he went to a split decision with Zach Makovsky as a minus 500 favorite. Can I just ask if that was something you'd feel great about? If he goes to a split decision here, a few fights later at the UFC level against a guy like Jose Johnson? I don't know. It just seems to me like a lot more upside on the way bigger guy with more professional experience at a higher level. So I'll go with Johnson here, and I'm actually going to pick him outright to win this fight. So that's the way it is. I'll either look like a genius or I'll look like a fool, and I don't give a Frenchman's fuck either way. Next up, my brother.
Exactly. It's like I think you're like me. It's like you see value on the line, you make a bet. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I can't stress all that the after hindsight kind of stuff. I saw value and I made the bet. That's how I stay true to my betting style.
Exactly. And for me, it's like when I look at these fights, I'm always going to try and make a case for the underdog. And in this one, it wasn't hard to do, right? It's just like I looked at the bulk of the evidence. I'm like, yeah, like I could just see a case for Jose Johnson winning this fight. If I didn't know the odds, I could still see that. So, yeah, man, for me, Jose Johnson, all in for the Platino pride. Garrett Armfield up next, my man. He's taking on Brady Highstand at 135 pounds. And I got to scroll up a little bit in the chat and see if I could find this, because somebody was talking shite. They were talking shite on me before, saying I was 100% going to pick Brady Highstand. I'm guessing because he's a grappler. And that is actually not going to be my pick here. I do think he's live, right? And so I'm not advocating laying the price on Armfield. However, I do think Armfield in rounds 1 and 2, cleaner boxer, probably likely to stuff the takedowns, taking his social media more seriously. To me, visually, looks like he's in much better shape physically. How he has accomplished that, you guys, that's up to your own conclusions. Maybe he's just been working really hard recently, but I just feel like I've seen a physical transformation. I've seen a guy who's either got a PR team or, a social media manager, or somebody got in his ear about like trying to promote himself and build his career. Now he's still slowing down a little bit in round 3s. That's the big danger on his side. That's the concern. And we know that Brady Highstand will continue to push that pace, try and wrestle, grapple into round 3. We saw him get the finish last time out. Proof of concept. He'll go out there and keep pushing till that 3rd round. But I also think he's pretty rudimentary on the feet. I think he's a pretty average guy standing. We've also seen Hellinger on his rise right before he made it to the Ultimate Fighter, was able to storm back and finish him. That was a brutal fight, back and forth both ways. Hellinger gave up some takedowns, looked for some guillotines, rolled all over the place with the guy, landed some big shots as well, though. And that, I think, is, for me, the difference here is Brady, he can go out there and maybe land a couple of kicks, a couple punches, but I just don't think he's going to do any substantive damage unless he gets this guy really fatigued. And for me, on the other side, I think Armfield, he's a very technical boxer. I think he's going to be the slicker guy on the feet, and I think he's going to land some damaging strikes. So for me, Armfield by KO or decision is the pick. But I think if you're on the Highstand side, the subline, the round 3, those are the 2 ways I'd probably look to play it, because I think he can storm back in this fight late. And I think the other way he could win it is just an opportunistic back take. Get this guy to the ground once, hop in, 2 hooks in. That's what good jiu-jitsu can do for you. And I think Highstand at his best could be opportunistic, get the sub. I think he did his whole camp in Washington. They're sick jitsu guys, going to go out there and probably try and wrestle grapple. And if it don't work out, he might get wrestle grappled. That is a consistent theme for the gym. So let's see how it goes. How about you, my brother? What do you feel?
Yeah, so this is going to be one of those fights where I'm going to pick Armfield to win outright, but have no interest in betting it at all, just because it fits like a criteria that I don't like to go against, where the underdog has the grappling upside and has the better cardio. Like, I just don't think that's a good mix to be laying juice on, even though I do give him like the early round finish equity, and like his advantages are probably the most pronounced in round one. So, I guess it would. So in that sense, like it could be decent, but overall, I just don't want to get involved. They're both young; they can be making improvements, but Armfield has lost previously multiple times by getting grappled on the regional scene. I know, he could be improving, and I think his takedown defense is decent. I was pretty sure he was going to beat that Kazama guy when they fought over in Asia. But I mean, High Stand is kind of relentless with his grappling. He can't strike for shit, but he fights through adversity. I'll give him that. And, I don't want to be holding a minus 180 going into round 3 if it's 1-1 and, he got put in a body triangle in round 2. So, yeah, I'm good on this fight. I'm going to pass.
Yeah, that's probably going to be my play as well. But I do think there might be a little more upside on the High Stand lines, just in terms of, playing into that small amount on sub 3 and then winning a big amount if you're right, and I think somebody described it on a show I was listening to this week. I can't remember who it is, or I'd give them credit. But basically it's like having a live entry. Actually, it might have been Aussie in a space I was in on Twitter this week. So shout out to Aussie Fight Picks, friend of the show. But I believe he had described it as like, it's like pre-entering live on High Stand after round 3, if he's still alive. And it's like, if it was a live scenario, like you described, and it's 1-1 going into round 3, it would probably be like, even money on High Stand or something close, right? Because the books have gotten sharper to cardio dynamics. And meanwhile, it's like you're preloading that for 2,300. Now let's sweat if this guy can survive 5 minutes when he's tired. I think that's kind of an interesting way to play it. So shout out to our guy Aussie Fight Picks for the idea. And with that being said, my man, it's on to the featured bout of the evening. Lucas Almeida taking on Timmy Kawamba. And I think it's Timmy Twilight Kawamba. Got his corner back for this fight. He didn't have what's his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name. The Vegas-based Cobra, DC Cobra or something. Dewey Cooper.
Dewey Cooper, yeah.
So Dewey Cooper is like his corner. He was with Francis Ngannou last time out. Shout out to my guy, JB, the Jewish better MMA line mover. He had given me that insight before the fight about Kawamba. He's like, yeah, his corner's not there. And now, his corner is going to be there for this fight, obviously. And the thing that strikes me, again, man, is like, I said the same thing about Judy's. When I'm looking at these lines and it's like, a guy who hasn't eclipsed like 45 significant strikes in a UFC fight yet. And he had the Contender Series fight with Vogel. And then he had the other fight more recently against Oki. And in both those fights, man, he's just not landing a lot of strikes. He's given up a takedown in both of his UFC fights. And now you're being asked to lay a big favorite price on him. And the thing about Almeida is he's off 2 losses, right? Doesn't look great coming in contextually. But you look at what he's accomplished overall in his career. He's got more professional fights. His back is against the wall. He needs this win to continue his UFC career, his hopes and dreams. He fought a training partner, I would say the more highlighted training partner, Daniel Zahuber, of this pairing, right? And it's like he did very well in that fight. He competed. He just lost the fight to a guy who is a really good prospect, as we've seen so far in the UFC. And so I think to myself, Almeida lost reasonable fights, Getting beat by Sabatini, if you go out there and have a stand-up kickboxing match for 15 minutes, not a good look. If he dominates you on the ground, it's like it happens sometimes, right? And he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Didn't look like it that night, but Pat Sabatini's done that to a lot of black belts. Then you look at, the other fight that he loses. It's like he gets chinned by Andre Fili, who would also, I think, be probably substantially favored to beat Timmy Kawamba right now. So it's like tough loss, but this is the guy who's basically been in this like sub plus 200 price range every time out. I've only bet on one Almeida fight so far in the UFC, my brother, and you could guess who it is by the fact
I remember.
Mike Trizano. Yeah. And I had the ITD there as well. Was it a sweat? Yes. Was it a greasy fight? Yeah. Can this guy stand in the pocket too long sometimes and get drilled in the face? Absolutely. But I do think he's tough. I think you have to hit him a million times to shut him off. Like, I think he's going to try everything he can to win this fight. And I think he's proven, number one, he'll throw and attempt more shots if they give them 15 minutes in this fight. And I also think like if they start wrestling and grappling, I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know that I should be favoring Kawamba in those positions. So for me, more upside on the underdog here. How about you, brother?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight. It's kind of hard to get a read on this Kwamba guy, just because the guy he fought on Contenders was on short notice, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
believe they called him up on short notice, and it was up at 155 against
yeah.
Silvia.
It seems like the dude has like pretty clean striking. It seems like he can crack. He's willing to trade in the pocket. He's kind of reckless himself. And that's kind of the way I look at Almeida too. He loves to crack. He's never trying to grapple, just like the Trezano fight's a perfect example. The Feely fight, he loves to strike. And I think we're getting a decent number on the under because if you look at Almeida's fights, I think all but the Zellhuber one were under 2.5. So just both of their style dynamics, I think, create for a solid play on the under 2.5. And even Kwambo is finished in his loss pre UFC. So I think the under is the way to play this fight. I wouldn't want to lay juice on Kwamba just because he is pretty unproven. And Almeida is a wild card, bro. Like, we don't really know too much about him. And his striking isn't that bad. Like, Feely caught him, but Feely's a great striker. I think Feely's a bit of a level ahead of Kwamba in the striking. So, yeah, I like the under. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. We're in the small cage. I could see violence happening here.
Totally agree. This is another one where I feel like Almeida and the under, interesting way to play it. That covers, a lot of his losing equity and I think some of his win equity. I also was struck by the plus 600 on Almeida by decision, just because we've seen this guy get outworked and taken down in both of his UFC fights. So it's just like, again, is Mateo Vogel like head and shoulders above Almeida? I don't know that to be true. Same thing with Oki. I don't know that to be true. I would favor Oki, I think, to beat him just on intangibles, size and athleticism, more youthful. But I just feel for me, Almeida at a similar price to what I got against Trezano, it just seems like probably the right side to be on here. But I don't hate your undertake at all, my man. And I think that if Kawamba wins, it's probably like knocking him out early, just because we've kind of seen for Almeida, he's a little bit slow and reactive when the fight's early. I think he gets into the fight. I think he can get, brutal as the fight goes on, wear on people a little bit, make it a dog fight. But if it's early, youth and athleticism might rule the day there.
Yeah, and I could see Almeida like really trying to go for the finish because he wants to earn another contract. You said this was the last fight on his contract?
I believe so for Almeida because I think this is the fourth fight in the UFC, and typically they sign that entry level
Yeah.
fourth fight deal.
So if he loses by decision, like, that's not going to bode well for him. So I could see him definitely throwing down hard for this one, even though he always does.
Heck yeah. Speaking of, my man, somehow the co-main event of the evening is Miles Chapo Johns taking on Douglas D. Silva D'Andrade. And I'll kick this one over to you, my man, because this is not a fight that I have any bets on. I did make an idea board for this fight, but it's nothing I felt good about. It's like just like looking through the numbers, like, man, these are probably plus EV, but do I feel good about them? Do I feel convicted about them? No. How about you,
Yeah.
my man? What are you thinking on
Yeah,
this one?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm still processing how I think this fight is gonna play out because, I did the tape and I've looked at the numbers and the lines and everything, and I'm sometimes how it is with certain fights, they're harder to figure out, and it takes you a while to like really sit on it and let your ideas go and your imagination try to plant how you think it's gonna play out. And this is one of those fights where I'm still trying to figure out how it plays out most times. At first, I thought I was going to like to play Andrade, but then going back and, seeing him in the Stamen fight, he was very low volume. He took the back foot. He got rocked multiple times. He got lucky to get that win because, there was an illegal up kick, and for some reason the ref didn't allow Stamen to have top position when it was returned, and they got back on their feet. And he kind of landed a spinning elbow, kind of a lucky memeish spinning elbow to kind of steal the round. And it was a super close fight anyways. And in round 3, he got rocked. And, that's kind of been a theme for him lately, is getting rocked in all of his fights. I will say he can fight through getting rocked quite well. So, I was thinking, maybe I'll slam the under, but it's like he fights through getting injured so well. And Miles John is like so risk adverse the way he fights, but he does fight somewhat intelligently. His problem is when fighters pressure him, he doesn't like being pressured. But if you give him the tempo that he likes, he's pretty clean. His wrestling is decent. He's pretty good from on top. He can ground and pound. He's pretty strong. He can hold you against the fence. All things that win minutes. He's generally winning decisions. So I don't know how much finishing upside he does have. His 2 finishes in the UFC were Anderson Dos Santos, who was like a shell of himself at that point in his career.
He was tragic. Tragic.
And what happened was Johns disabled him with leg kicks. His leg kicks are actually pretty solid. It's a good weapon of his. So I was trying to figure out the striking dynamic between the two, like who's going to take front foot, how much volume is going to take place, if it's going to be more kick space, if it's going to be high tempo or low tempo. And I'm still kind of working all that stuff out right now. By the end of it, I was kind of thinking Johns was the side just because of De Silva's lack of volume, how he's gotten hurt in multiple fights, and his age. So, yeah, I'm starting to think Johns is the side, but I don't know how I'm going to play it. And if I would even want to, I feel like I kind of missed the boat at the pick'em number. And the thing about Johns is he doesn't really handle adversity well. And De Silva, he brings a lot of volatility into his fights because he throws a lot of wild strikes, a lot of, spinning back fists. He's got some decent power in his hands, but yeah, that's all I got for now.
I feel you, my man. This is not a fight I feel super bullish on. When I look at the De Silva, the Andrade side, the way I would play this if I was to get involved is the sub at 16-1. And the reason I say that is just because Miles Johns does tend to alleviate pressure with takedowns. And I do think that Andrade is a willing grappler, right? We saw against Sergey Morozov, he basically squeezed the life out of that guy, literally choked him unconscious, blood squirting out of his eyeballs and everything. That was disgusting. And I like grappling. I like fighting. That was literally gross. Like, this dude put an insane squeeze on him and literally just choked him unconscious in the middle of the cage. Also, he attempts guillotines. He just goes for offensive grappling. And so if you're going to say that this is a pick 'em fight, I think that that's got to be a piece of his win equity here for sure, and a big piece of it. Now, on the other side, I do think Johns at times can be a little chinny, but I also think the same thing is now true of a once very durable De Silva, right? And I think that at 39 years of age, it's just very scary because we know that the statistics, the aggregate says fighters over this age just get knocked out at a very alarming clip. Now, I agree with your assessment about Johns in terms of his offense. He is a guy that tends to be very hesitant, very reserved, just do enough to win the fight, to win the decision, scrape by, doesn't go out there and put a statement in a lot of his fights. But this does seem like an opportunity, raising the co-main event. It's a pretty quiet card. And it's an older fighter. It's a guy that has a lot of respect, a lot of name recognition, credibility. But I think that somebody mentioned earlier, you got one guy who's kind of on the come up, right? Making that improvement fight over fight. Trey Ogden seems like a good voice in his corner in terms of like guys that get through to him. Hey, fight behind your jab, be smart, move, use the takedown to alleviate the pressure, but don't stick around if you don't feel comfortable on the ground, just get back up. So I think it's probably another boring Johns decision is like my gut feeling here. And that's probably what I'm going to end up writing up. But I'm also going to put in there, I do think Johns has fallen apart before down the stretch in his fights, right? Where he just collapses a little bit late. He fouled Kevin Natividad right from the school of Islam Makhachev glove control, brother, just like held that shit and uppercutted him right out of his boots. So for me, I always root against Miles Johns. I'll just disclose that. And it would be very satisfying to see the Brazilian come through here. But I do think that Miles Johns is the side. Unfortunately, I'm kind of seeing the improvements over time in his game. And De Silva, a guy that we all respect, but probably the floor going to bottom out here pretty soon.
Yeah, and I'm kind of leaning towards John's decision too. I think he's going to come in with a good game plan, fight smart, like you said, and I think he's going to be able to potentially get some top time and get some grappling going. And the slower De Silva gets, the longer the fight goes. I think the less finishing upside he has. So, yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page with this one.
Heck yeah. So to briefly summarize, guys, if I was on Andrade, I'm looking at the sub. And if I'm on the John side, I'm either looking at the KO at 5-1, or I'm looking at the money line, the decision. It's like plus 150, just a disgusting price. I'd almost rather lay the small chalk and just have more overall win equity than to get that small plus money on the decision against a 39-year-old fighter that's just playing against trends. So yep, that's the overall thoughts there. But now, the piece de resistance. We've got the main event, my man. It's going down in the flyweight division. And I said earlier today on X, where many of our viewers are joining us from. So shout out to all you guys that are watching. Like I said, if you don't mind, go ahead and share this with your community. We're about to talk the main event of the evening. Going to try and give you guys some plus EV looks here. And if you're on YouTube, get subscribed to the channel, drop a like on the video, show some love to our guys over at Fight Numbers. Pepe is a part of that sharp crew. There's a lot of smart guys on the team. Also, if you're a resourced gambler yourself, if you're somebody that's looking to do this long-term win, you know how important it is to get the best of the price. It's a tool that will help you guys win, whether you're originating or whether you're looking to tail sharp individuals. So thank you guys for the support. Appreciate you all for tuning in. My brother from another, how do you feel about this main event? It's my guy, Tatsuro Taira, taking on Alex Perez, a guy that I was saying a while ago deserves respect. He's not a guy that people should be throwing dirt on the grave because he missed a couple of UFC fights. But it was not long ago everybody thought this guy's a joke. He's a bum. He sucks. He can't make it to the fight. Oh, laughing stock. He can't even make it on the scales. Oh, and now it's like Alex Perez, man. What a dog opportunity. I'm curious how you come down on this one, my brother.
Yeah, man. Super interesting fight. Let me just pull up some Perez on it. Yeah, super interesting fight. I'm really looking forward to this. This one caught me off the radar quite a bit. I didn't really see this matchup ever coming together anytime soon. When they matched up Van with Taira, that kind of made a little sense to see like which of these young prospects is for real, about to make a top 5 kind of run, we'll say. But yeah, I just, and it was kind of weird how they pulled that matchmaking and put Van against Tagir and then Taira against Perez. Do you have any insight on why the matchmaking was changed after the original matches were made?
No, but my guess would be this. I think they needed a main event. I think they were like trying to figure out what they were going to do for a main event on this card. If I'm not mistaken, there was many cancellations along the way. So it's like they're looking for something that they could sell. Is like, all right, what's the top billing here? And honestly, I think the guy who was more deserving of the opportunity in the main event is Tatsuro Taira. Why? He's had more time in the UFC.
Was Perez and Tagir booked?
Yes, that was a scheduled bout as well.
Oh yeah, so for this day. So basically, they didn't want to give Tagir the main event then, because
I suppose so.
Perez has already had a main event, so they have no problem booking him in the main event. It made sense. He had a great performance against Nicolau. Kind of shocked the world. He was a decent sized underdog in that spot, and he performed really well. He looked like his old self. So obviously they were prepared to allow him to have the main event spot, and then they match him up with Tagir. So they switched Tagir out with Taira. So clearly they didn't want Tagir in the main event spot, which is just an interesting note about the matchup. As far as how they match up, I'm really excited to see how they match up. I'm really glad that Taira is getting this step up in competition. He's always outperformed his competition by quite a bit. He hasn't faced that much adversity in the UFC. He's pretty much run through all of his opponents, and they've matched him up. I guess I'll say they've matched him up pretty softly. They've thrown him softballs for him to just absolutely, cut through. I think maybe the fight that he had the most. What was the fight that he had the most adversity?
The two fights where I would say he faced resistance was Edgar Chairez and CJ Vergara.
Okay. But going back and watching the Chairez fight, I think I remembered Chairez having more success than he actually did. He really didn't even have that much success. Taira dominated him on the ground for most of the fight. I think the thing that sticks out to people is that he got mildly dropped by a leg kick or caught off balance. And he got kind of stung by a straight left in round one, kind of dropped him. And then I think that's when Chairez pulled guillotine and then ended up on bottom, and then Taira spent the remaining of the round on top. I guess that could potentially show that, leg kicks could be a potential weakness for Taira, and he is facing someone who's got super solid leg kicks. I've heard some people say they don't think that Taira's wrestling is that good, but going back and watching that fight, I thought his wrestling entries looked really solid. He was able to hook his hands, blast doubles, was very opportunistic about when he saw the opening. I think I forgot what Chairez was doing, but he tried to get some offense off, and Taira saw that opportunity and ducked down and was able to get the double leg and get him to the ground. But I have to give Perez his flowers too. He's a solid fighter. He's fought the way higher level of competition. His anti-wrestling is really solid amongst the flyweights. His boxing is really clean. He sees things coming. He's very defensively sound. And I think Taira has showed a new wrinkle in his game with his striking. He's got a lot more power in his hands than he had previously, and he feels a lot more comfortable on the feet. I think when he got stung in round one against Chairez, it kind of showed that he can take a punch and fight through it. He didn't go down or whatever. So I think he does have a pretty good chin. In terms of how they match up, I think Taira has more ways to win. I think it could potentially be a really close fight. The line is minus 200. I get why Taira is favorite after doing tape, but I don't think I want to lay the money line. How do you think the fight's going to play out?
My brother, I'm so excited to talk about this one. And there's many reasons why. But let's start with the first and foremost. I enjoyed Tatsuro Taira's fights, right? Sometimes you have to watch these things and it's a chore, right? I described the fact that Knudsen and whatever, I'm going to watch this tape before I have to write an article because it's my job. But when you look at, enjoying fights, I'm a fight enjoyer. I'm a fight connoisseur, and I love Tatsuro Taira since before he got to the UFC. And it's because I was watching, I'm looking at myself, okay, who is this guy? Tatsuro Taira. What's he all about? And, shout out to Library, I have to say as well, who had said with conviction, he's like, this guy is going to be a future UFC champion. I was like, what is he talking about? I was like, what is he all on about? And I did look into it, and I was like, I can see it. There's not been an Asian UFC champion, especially a Japanese UFC champion. JMMA, the history is so deep. There's been a great lineage, a great custom, but just translating over at the UFC level hasn't happened yet. And I think this is one of their best opportunities. I tweeted last year, Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think I said Lakhmonov in that tweet. Watch that space. And then our guy Tatsuro Taira, the future of Asian MMA is bright. And when you look at Taira, why am I high on him? Number one, I've watched all his old fights, right? And so I'm not going to pretend like I've rewatched every one of his old fights this week because I'm a busy man. But I did all that tape before he ever got to the UFC. And that's why I was so high on him coming in, because not only does he have the submissions, the record shows that. right? You just look at Tapology, you're like, man, this guy submits everybody. Wow, so good at that. But you look at the fights themselves, and he's out there moving on his feet, comfortable, bouncing around a little bit. Bang, left hand, the guy is staggering. He's all over the place. He's wobbling. Then he takes it to the ground and instantly submits them. And I talk about all the time, fighting, a lot of it is instinctual, right? It's people that can fight on instincts that can do very well. And when somebody has finishing instincts, there's some people you can't teach that to in the gym, right? There's some people, they go for points in everything they do, right? I'll be up 2-1. Like, that's fine. You see wrestlers that go out there, they're the most boring people in the world, but you respect the grind. They beat everybody 2-0. Nobody wants to watch that, but hey, it's effective, right? You get one score more than the other guy. That's not Tatsuro Taira. He's trying to finish the fight all the time. So sometimes it goes to decision. But in those fights, guys, go back and rewatch it. Tell me he didn't try to finish the fight. He tries to finish every fight. He's on top position. He's not doing, hey, let me try an omoplata. Let me try that. He'll look for a submission when he thinks it's there. He'll look for ground and pound when he thinks it's there. He'll control the body when he thinks that's what he needs to do next. He uses mixed martial arts, right? So often, the problem I have with grapplers, with wrestlers, fundamentally, when they come into mixed martial arts, they think it's a wrestling match. They think we're here to have a jiu-jitsu competition, and it's a fight. So if you're not trying to fight somebody, I understand why judges sometimes are pressed. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? I do think grappling is sometimes underrated by the officiating, by the rule set. But guys like Taira understand the assignment. It's a fight. Get out there and fight this guy. So whether that means I have to implement my grappling, my wrestling, I have to change the position, I'm going to get on top of this guy and beat him up. If he gets on top of me, I'm going to sweep. I'm going to reverse. I'm going to get on top of him. I'm going to attempt submissions that he can't deal with. I'm going to be 1, 2, 3 steps ahead in my chains of attacks. And so let's give the credit right off the rip to a guy like Alex Perez, who I said, somebody had tweeted long ago, Alex Perez pulls out of this fight, whatever. Does he have the most pathetic career in UFC history? And I was like, are you fucking insane? Like, just like, what a preposterous statement, right? Of all the people that we've seen come through this organization, and a guy like Alex Perez who fought for the title, did it go his way? No. Did I bet him, did I fade him in that fight? Yeah, absolutely. I had the minus 255 on Figueiredo. I had Figgy inside the distance. I parlayed it. I was like, Figgy's going to beat this guy. But when you look at Figueiredo, you see why. He's just 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead in the jiu-jitsu. He's rolling back for a leg lock. He's getting into an entanglement. He switches out. Alex Perez goes to take his back. He rolls back for the guillotine. The fight's over. It's like that guy is just moving at a different pace, and he's thinking on a different level in the jiu-jitsu than a guy like Perez. And Perez, I would say that's the classic wrestler in him, right? As a wrestler, very good. Muhammad Mokaev, why was it such a tough fight for him? He is a guy that wants to wrestle. Wrestle. He'll wrestle with you all night, right? And so you think about that Charles Johnson fight. What did he do? He didn't try to fight Charles. He did the last thing but fight Charles. He just wrestled him all night. And you can win on the 10-9 must system by doing that, by preventing your opponent from fighting you back, right? It's one way to win a fight. Is it the most entertaining way? No. Is it going to get you the most fans? No. But you can win like that. That's what Mokaev needed to do to win against a guy like Perez. Perez is a tricky guy. I thought Mokaev could catch him in a transitional submission. But the thing was, Perez didn't want to wrestle. He didn't want to grapple. He was like, I'm going to force this kid to strike with me. I'm going to anti-wrestle. I'm going to anti-grapple. I think the difference is this. Muhammad Mokaev, number one, he's sick going into that fight. Self-admitted, like, I wasn't feeling well, posting pictures of his toilet contents on the internet. Nobody needs to see that shit. But when you're looking at this, bro, I'm saying to myself, okay, we got a young, healthy 24-year-old. Is he the bigger guy? Yes, he is, in every category. So he's the younger guy. He's the bigger guy. He's coming in here. Does he have the same amount of professional experience at this level? No. And that's the caveat you got to say. 5-round fight, a little bit of an unknown. So then I asked myself, okay, well, did he do the right things to get himself ready? Number one, he's been to decision in the UFC. In those fights, in round 3, typically he's finishing off strong. Obviously, the Taira fight, the guillotine threat late in that fight, hats off, credit where it's due. I think if that was a 5-round fight, he comes out and beats the shit out of him in round 4 anyway, but that's the way I see it. When you look at, what we've seen from Taira, is he in Japan right now? Got to hop on a flight, come over? No. Did his camp in Colorado. Did his training at Team Elevation. Did his training with pound for pound Muay Thai. And is that because he wants to work on his jiu-jitsu? I think he's trying to work on his striking to make sure when these fights are on the feet, I'm ready to go. I'm comfortable. And I said before his last couple of fights, I'm like, this guy doesn't get credit for the power. He doesn't get credit for the fact he's got massive hands for this division. Just look at the size of his hands. And I know this sounds like a silly point to make. They're big. He has big hands for a 125-pound fighter. He hits people with these bricks for hands, and then they fall over. Or like what's his name? Carlos Hernandez. He fought two guys named Carlos, excuse me. But Carlos Hernandez, he literally caved his eye in, dude. Go back and rewatch that. People talk about, oh, he had to follow him to the ground, positional TKO. The guy's fucking eye was like caved in from the left hand before they ever go to the ground. Then Taira's just like, I'm going to prove that I don't need to get the sub here. I'm going to beat this guy up until the referee pulls me off. And that's exactly what he did. By the way, that guy's had 28 fights, pro and amateur. He'd never been stopped before with strikes. Is he a bum now? That's what everybody says about anybody Taira beats, right? They all make the case to bet him beforehand, right? Make no mistake about that. I was there when everybody wanted to bet Candelario. I was there when everybody wanted to bet CJ Vergara, and Taira's a fraud and this. But I've been saying the whole time, I'm like, I don't know about all that. When he fought Chairez, I said, guys, minus 700, that's a little aggressive. I was like, Chairez, he's not a punk, right? He's not going to give it up easy. He's not a guy who just goes out there and flakes. Have we ever seen that from him? He could be out grappled sometimes, but in round 5 against Jesus Aguilar in a fight he's winning, it's like, he's not a punk. So I was like, this is going to be an honest test. And he went out there and fought, and they had a good scrap. I don't think Chairez is a bum. I don't think Chairez is an easy mark. So for me, he gets no credit for his wins, right? Nobody ever says, hey, nicely done. Then let's look at the Alex Perez side. Is he a proven underdog? You could say yes, because last time out he won against Nicolau. By the way, called him there by KO. Called him KO or decision. Said it would happen later on in the fight. And it's not like I'm a Perez hater, right? Last time I'm like, he's going to beat Nicolau. You run Tatsuro Taira versus Mateus Nicolau in that same fight, right? Sub out Perez. Sub in Tatsuro Taira. He knocks him out in 3 rounds. That's my honest-to-God prediction. So if that's how I feel about that, what am I going to say when Perez does it? Hey, hats off to him. I don't think that changes the outcome of this fight. I think if this fight stays on the feet, the difference between my take and the market's take is that I think Tatsuro Taira wins the fight on the feet. I think he can knock him out standing. I think he can take him to the ground and beat the shit out of him. And I also think that if it's a grappling match, maybe it's competitive at points. I think the guy who has a better chance to win with a transitional submission, Tatsuro Taira. So for me, if this fight goes to the scorecards, there's some unknowns, no doubt about it. But who do I think has more upside? The guy who's young, the guy who can get a back body triangle and ride out the round for the full time, the guy who can get the mount, pass all these different positions. And here's the last thing I'll mention. He baits people to go for this guillotine. Because you had asked how I see this going. He baits people to go for the guillotine. I'm quite sure of it, because when he starts to, like, if somebody starts to D up the takedown, he'll just lean his neck out there. 3 or 4 of these guys have gone for the guillotine. How does it end up for them? They get their guard passed. Not only does he just like use it to get the free takedown, he uses it to set up the inevitable guard pass, because when somebody gets a guillotine, one of the ways you negate it, pass the guard. Then they have nothing again. So that, I think, has been a hallmark of his game. Good trips, good ability to get to the body lock, good ability to kick. I think the other note I want to make here, the low kicking range, which is a lot of people are bringing that up as like critical here. I've seen Tatsuro Taira check low kicks. I've seen him return his own hard low kicks and get respect. I don't think he's going to be a punk at kicking range in this fight. So I think Perez could land hard shots. I think he could land hard shots. I think that with the hands, Perez is a little bit more of this. Taira, long, straight. I think he's going to be the one connecting with the bigger shots. And I think he's underrated as a striker, period. So give me Tatsuro Taira by knockout. That's the pick.
His accuracy was something that really stood out on his punch on Hernandez. Like, he just landed it like in the perfect possible spot. And, you know, I don't really remember him before that, like, being so accurate with it, with his striking, with his hands. So it was obviously super impressive. It's going to be a difficult fight for Perez because Taira is so well-rounded. You know, he's got so many more ways to win. And, you know, like you were talking about, you know, people not giving him the credit, but I think he does get decent credit. I mean, he's always been a huge favorite. It's not like we've been able to scoop up dog odds on him at all.
True,
you know?
true.
So,
although the sub used to be plus 350 against the Vergaras of the world, and now it's plus 140 against Perez, who's a much better grappler. So.
Yeah, so I think props are a solid way to play this fight. And then I want to know that, I don't know if you noticed or not, but like I think it was last week or this week, the UFC announced that they had just signed Kai Asakura from Ryzen, who's a fellow Japanese prospect. And I think he's the champion in Ryzen, and Ryzen was they allowed him to leave his contract to come over to the UFC. So kind of interesting to do it during Taira fight week.
And former Ryzen champion Yuri Prohaska gets the rematch for International Fight Week.
Yeah,
He's a star in Japan as well.
Hopefully, former Rising star Manel Kopp will make a statement win the following month and get a title shot.
Hell yeah, my man. Well, I know we've kept you up late. It's 1:35 on the East Coast. My brother from another. I think that, all things considered, there's some good betting opportunities on what's otherwise a pretty shite card. I think that Tatsuro Taira, is the shining, prospect on a hill for this fight card. And otherwise, we're a little bit in the dregs, but I also think Perez deserves the opportunities and the respect. Happy for him to go out there, make a living, make some money, get in there, be healthy, continue his career. But I think that, last time out, it was a good situational fight for him. And I think now the rubber is going to meet the road. And I think this is the real prospect. I think that Mateus Nicolau has been found out a few times. And I think that this guy, Tatsuro Taira, nobody's had the answer yet. 24 men have tried, 24 men have failed. And maybe 20 more will fail too. The case is the case to me.
It's tough with picking which method he to finish by, because Perez has been submitted so many times, including back to his regional scene days. And he's very prone to make mistakes in transitions, like we have already talked about. But with Taira, it seems to like his hands a bit more, and Perez might be able to keep it on the feet. So I would hate to play the sub at plus 130 and then he knocks him out.
Yeah, and there's even money on Taira ITD. So, yeah, that's what I would definitely lean towards if you like the sub angle, if you like the KO angle. And I think that the money line's now, been adjusted a little bit, but I think anything under 2-1, I thought he was the side at those numbers personally. So interesting fight, but win or lose here, I will say this, guys, he's still going to be my favorite fighter, you bastard. So I'm rooting for my guy. Let's see how it goes, but I think he is a deserved main eventer, and I think that will all be borne out on Saturday night. Guys, you can find my guest at Pepe Silvia. So at Pepe_Silvia 716, representing the great state of New York, the great city of Buffalo, the 716. My brother from another, representing fight numbers as well. Please tell the people where they can find you and all the great work you're doing, my man.
Yeah, so like Liam mentioned, that's my Twitter handle. I'm affiliated, associated, part of Fight Numbers, and it's a super dope site. We got a Discord. We have a ton of different betting tools that I don't think are really available anywhere else. We're trying to really be innovative about bringing people, sharp bettors, and taking their betting skills and styles to the next level. There's not a ton of tools out there. We have different API that we pay for that brings in on information, on live information, bringing in from various books. So as the fights are going, we're getting live numbers from the various books. We have a bunch of different books that we use to compare which sharper books are shading certain ways, which is very helpful. And we're building tools to that we're going to be able to, that's going to be super cool with certain trends, like when a person has this much, is this much older, what percent of the chance that they win, and trying to bake it all together. So come check it out, get a part of the Discord, and let's have a good week.
Absolutely. You guys can check it all out. The information that you need for fight numbers down in the description box below. You can use my promo code Liam. They'll hook you up with a 30% discount on that first month as well. And right now, guys, we want to give you a shout from the fight prop finder from Fight Numbers, Tatsuro Taira by KO TKO plus 750 over at FanDuel, whereas it's plus 500 at Superbook. We're talking about $2.50 different on every bet that you're making. That's substantial, right? So you just want to always get the best of the number. Same thing on money lines. They've got the best props, the best money line prices for all of these different fights. Right now, we're looking at a minus 190 for Tatsuro Taira, best available, plus 188 the comeback on Alex Perez. So we're literally looking at a fight where the synthetic hold you can get is about 2 cents. So again, the best way to win is to get the best of the number, fightnumbers.com. Thank you very much, my brother. New York in the house. Shout out to our guy, Ryan Burgos, Section 9 in the fucking building.
Yeah,
Stand
that
up.
was sick.
That's absolutely critical for the scene right now. And we've just got a lot of great things on the horizon. So if you guys don't mind, go ahead and tell somebody about the show. If you enjoyed it, drop a like on the video. Any questions, comments, concerns that you got, fire them off in the chat. Until next time, come back and we're having all the same fun again. God bless.